Today, our goal is to draw fabric, the folds of fabric. So I have my paper ready, and I would suggest that you find a t-shirt, something without any patterns, and not a white t-shirt. I think finding a shirt that's slightly colored, or it's a little bit darker, not too dark, but just like has some shade into it. That way, I think it's a little bit easier to see the lights and the darks of the folds. So the goal here is for you to understand how to create the ruffles, the folds, the lights and the darks, and to bring that out onto the paper, your rendering of the folds. Okay, so the light source for me is, right now I have overhead fluorescence. You could have natural light coming through a window. You could have a desk lamp shining on your fabric. And the first step is to figure out how complicated I want these folds. And for this one, I don't want something too complicated, so I don't want to scrunch it up that much. That's just too complicated. That's very frustrating. That's just very intimidating to try to draw as a beginning drawer. So let's kind of unruffle that and kind of fold it. Maybe just see, how does that look? This looks pretty good. I think we're gonna go with this right here. And if you'd like, you could take a picture of your folds and crop in a little bit. So you don't do the whole thing, but just crop into a section of this. So that's a lot easier to tackle, more doable versus all of this. So just a section of this. I'm gonna try to attempt to draw a section of this, okay? So first off, I have a pencil, a regular HB number 2 pencil. I have an eraser, and any eraser will do. Those pink erasers are fine. This is pretty big here. Let's see. Take a pair of scissors and I'm gonna be careful, but I'm just gonna cut it down a little bit. Inside, watch your fingers. So I created kind of a wedge. See, that allows me to do more detail, to bring out the highlights of the fabric. This extra piece here, that's a good piece right there too. I have a wider side and a narrower side. I have a brush to wipe away excess eraser. I also have these graphite pencils I got from a dollar store. I want to try these out with this drawing. These were $1, or maybe $1.25. All right, so where do we begin? A lot of you have been drawing, starting off with lines. You draw the lines of the edge, the contour of this, the shapes. And we're gonna try something a little bit different today. We're gonna start off by taking your graphite pencil, and I want you to try this because it's really, another way to capture light and dark. It's a great exercise to expand your skills, your technique of capturing lights and darks, and in a way, bring a sense of three-dimensionality to your piece, make it look more three-dimensional, more realistic. So it's not flat. If you just did the lines, it's just the shapes are defined by the lines, and that's kind of flat. So first off, I'm going to shade in this area. And you see I'm holding it from a little bit farther away, so very light, very quick. what I want to do is to cover this with a gray. So I want to create a toned surface first. It's going to be already a darkness, a shade on the paper. So we're not going to draw lines or the shape of the folds yet, but we're just want to take our time and you know, be patient. Go through this step. And that's something I think is going to really help you to improve your skills, is to be patient and take the time to go through this step. So I'm trying to create an even tone just with the pencil. Just a little bit of light pressure, let the pencil do the work. And already you're seeing this is the white of the paper reflecting back most of the light source, and this is a gray. Don't worry if it's not like not dark enough in the beginning. Just take the time to block in your gray. Take a break if you need to, but I'm just being consistent by putting in the angled lines. And your goal is to cover up as much of the white of the paper as possible in this given area, okay? And this is like roughly 8 by 8 square. And yeah, I highly recommend you draw this large, the background, because the larger you make the surface, the more room you have to do the details. Yes. Be careful drawing too small. Sometimes these small, tiny drawings are very precious, and it's really not capturing the proportion, the shape. Okay, keep going. You can go back over a layer. These pencils are overall a little bit lighter than a regular pencil. So at this point, it's not bad. I might want to go with the another pencil to do darker shadows later. You can speed up through the video also if a little bit faster, get to the main points. That helps as well. Trying to remove all these little white streaks coming through from the white of the paper. Try to make it as even as possible. So as you can see, it's getting darker and darker and darker. And again, my goal is to create an even surface. All right, and then you can turn the paper a different angle. If you put another layer that way, it makes it a little bit more even, a little bit more darker. It's like cross-hatching. We're trying to get the whole surface covered. And I'm kind of trying to use the flat of the tip, not like this, but from the side, so it's a little bit more broader, the pencil mark. Okay, next step is I'm going to take tissue, kind of bunch it up into a little kind of ball there. Yes, very light circles. And what that does is it softens the texture, it fills up some of those places we missed to create a flat surface. You got to be careful not to get the oils of your hand on the paper because that'll look differently once you do this step. Yeah, graphite and oil does not mix. It kind of creates streaks. Okay. All right. Our little blending tissue, put that to the side. So now the next step is not to draw lines or shapes. I want you to take your eraser, okay, and we're going to draw with the eraser. Let me take a look at, see how this looks. So what I'm drawing here from the t-shirt is, notice 3 values here. The lightest portion, this is the ridge of this little mountain here, the surface. This is the area closest to the light source, so it's the brightest. Notice how bright that is? And then here you have the gray, the middle value, kind of like in between the highlight area. See how the white highlight area flows and connects the surface of this fabric? It gives the idea of volume. And then off to the side you have like a little bit darker area, goes from light to a little bit gray area here. And then you have the shadow areas, the darkest portion. Even on this little area here, you have highlights, grays, and then right in the crevice in the valleys, you see how there's the darkest shadow. There's shadow right there. Okay, so think in terms of 3. 1, 2, 3. Highlights, the lightest portion. The in-between gray, which this represents, what you already drew on this paper. That represents the middle gray. And then you have the darker shadows. So our next step is to, instead of drawing with a pencil, we're going to draw the light with your eraser. You're going to try to identify these areas right here. So I'm going to try to draw, okay, so I'm going to try to draw this area first. Just take your time, just follow with your eye the light area. Identify the shapes of that highlight, that plane, that surface. It turns here, follows that ridge back here. You can move your eraser in different movements, up and down. But you're thinking shapes of light. But don't make up these shapes. I want you to really take your time to identify. And this is from your study of proportion, just your practice. Get that under your belt, you're more comfortable with drawing. And the first time you do this, it's not easy. It takes time and multiple revisions. There's that big old space right there. Draw that shape like a... This takes patience too. It's not going to happen right away. You have to kind of block in these large shapes of light and dark. It's that little triangle area. Where are the light areas, the big light areas? So you're training your eye to see the difference of light and dark. And this skill will help you to draw a lot of different things, just in terms of observation skills. So you can render things logically, clearly, accurately. Sometimes it requires you to close one eye, because when your subject is this close, it can be kind of confusing with the object kind of overlapping, creating a double image. Just a light brush. So look at that. We're bringing out the highlights. And I'm not worried about every little detail, but I just want to get the big shapes here. Just the rhythm of the folds. And if you feel like this is a little bit too complicated, make it even smaller. Take that little piece and blow it up larger, focusing just on a little bit of a smaller area. Or use a bigger, maybe a towel or something. Now I'm going to look at the contour, the edge here. So follow that contour around the edge of this water shore, this outcropping. And that's where taking a picture of this helps sometimes, but I think there's a benefit to drawing from the object right in front of you and not referring to a flat two-dimensional image. Sometimes it can be a little more dramatic, more lively. Okay, I think that's good. That's it. To move on to the next step. For this one, I'll go back to just a regular pencil. So now our goal is to draw the shadows. So I'm trying to find where are the darker areas throughout this composition. So I'm going to start off right here, kind of central, this kind of curve, this dark area. So I'm going to go back and draw the shadow of that. So by adding another layer, so I'm following that down, just trying to get really simple, just that edge right there. Let's do a little cross hatching. I don't want to get too fancy. I just want to get just a shape with that shadow. Step by step, very kind of logical. Trust yourself in the process. When you break it down into the process, it becomes a little bit less intimidating. Sometimes you can do little circles to get like shapes. So you notice we're not worried about lines, we're worried about shapes of value, shapes of light and dark, shapes of tones. So now this stands out, the shadow stands out because it's darker than its surrounding. But I'm not making it up, I'm really trying to focus in on, what am I looking at here? I see another shape here, this kind of crescent or this semi-elongated piece right there. I want to fill that in with some darkness. And I want to make this a little bit darker than the original tone or value we established. Patience, patience, patience. So my eyes are focused really on identifying these shadows. And the first time you do this, I remember when I first did this as a student, it was very frustrating. I didn't really know what I was doing, but just practicing and seeing the results, correcting for the lights and darks and seeing demonstrations by other people, it really helped. Okay, so that shadow, that dark shadow flowed into this piece right here. And for this piece, there's another piece that goes up. There's another shadow shape, a little bit thinner. I want to connect it. So I had an instructor once that he said something that kind of stood out. The idea of imagine shadows being poured from a cup. The shadows on a lot of surfaces, like fabric or the human figure, objects, they connect with each other. They flow down around the shapes and forms. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to flow the shadow from here, just flowing down, flowing up, connecting with each other. You know, there are times when shadows are disconnected, but this one, there's a lot of connection. What a wonderful technique. This just helps you, gives you the tools to draw and express yourself in so many different ways. You might even come up with your own style of connecting the shadows with different media like charcoal, ink pen. Look at that little teardrop or that little leaf-like shape right there. Let's draw that in, block that in. Patience. Little piece on this side, there's a little shadow area. Shadow area means it's recessed or blocked by another object or thing. The shadows allow the highlights to come forward, create that illusion of 3-dimension on a 2-dimensional surface. So look at that, and then here, little triangle piece. These, the darker shadow areas right now, they're kind of like the same value. Okay, so there's shadow, there's middle value, and there's highlights. So let's go back up here. Sorry, go around this area. There's a shadow area here we want to bring out. Sometimes if you're in a room with multiple light sources, they can create more complex shadows. So that could be tougher for you. So if you can limit it to one light source, that might be helpful for you. Whether it's natural light coming in from a window, just one light source. That way you get consistent, identifiable shadows. There's more shadows here on the side, kind of flowing down. And my goal is to make it darker than the original tone, that gray that we started off with. Yeah, make it your folds a little bit simpler if you'd like, to your level of comfort. It's also sometimes good to be uncomfortable with your drawing. You're kind of trying something new, which is good. There's that shape right here, this elongated teardrop shape. So the more pencil I put down, the darker it becomes. I'm trying to still block in the shadows and not worry about every little detail. This little edge that sticks out right there. And there's a shadow underneath the fabric here. I want to block in that shape. So right there. Let's block that in. me 1 second. Let me take a look at in camera if we're starting to see the light. Yep, we're starting to see some shapes and forms emerging. Little triangular, rounded triangular shape of shadows here. And you notice some of the shadows, they go from dark shadows to a faded light shadow. And I'm not really concerned about that right now. I'm really concerned about having these shadows aligning with the highlights. You see that ridge right there? That light will pop a little bit more once I make this darker and darker. The edge, the shadows will become darker when they're more crisp. The fabric is more abrupt, a little more dramatic turning of the light and the dark. I'm not worried about single lines. I'm worried about areas of light and dark. Depending on your fabric can be a little bit rough, depending on if it's cotton, linen, all sorts of different fabrics out there. And remember what I said earlier, the idea of 1, 2, 3, 3 levels of highlight, gray, shadow. So I'm defining the edge, not with line, but light and dark. And typically I like to go with large areas to more detailed as we continue. It's just so much more less stressful than just going straight to detail, which some artists can do, but by the way, they're able to do that. If you want to turn your paper sometimes, that helps. Okay, let's see here where we're at. The shape, that form. Go down here, there's a shadow defining this edge. Let me get this little teardrop shape right here. Okay, so now let's see here. Try these pencils again. Now I want to go back in and take my time to do more detail. So I'm going to focus on this area right here. And what I want to do is from this corner across, I want to take my time and just press just a little bit harder. And I want to just do some definition, like the deeper, darker shadows. I want to separate out even the darker grays the shadows that we've created. So I'm going to fade this. I'm going to go from this dark area out, put a little arrow here. As it moves away into the light, I'm going to gradually get lighter and lighter. So dark, and as it fades down, it's going to get lighter and lighter and lighter. So it's a thing called a gradient. Is moving from dark to light, light to dark, from one color to another. It's a transition. Sometimes it's abrupt, sometimes it's smoother. So I'm going to try to create a soft, faded transition from that shadow out into, towards my highlights. Define the highlights. Understanding this process of light and dark and shading can help you as a photographer, as a videographer, light sources, gradients, balancing out your grays, your values, creating harmonious values. And what are harmonious lights and darks? Well, traditionally, you have a even distribution of grays, highlights, and shadows. They complement each other. There's an evenness to the amount of shadows, to highlights, to grays. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And what's nice about this, I'm just concentrating on this one little area. Next, I'm going to go up here and just do more detail. Trying to put in a little bit deeper shadows here. And I'm moving towards my highlight, it's the edge of this cloth. And I'm going back into the blocked in areas and do a little bit more detail. Try to put in the darks and lights and a little more complexity. But I'm always thinking, where's the highlight? I want to define the highlight on this ridge here. By having shadows, good shadows, you'll bring out the good highlights. Do little circles if you want. Just adding more material. It gets darker and darker. So this shadow here, it turns over the surface here. There's that crevice here that's a little bit darker. One really cool thing about drawing, it really slows you down to observe the space or objects around you. You know, give them a second look and and notice these things. Notice the small pieces, how the light falls on object, how we see things. Where's the highlight? Here's a highlight. Here's a highlight. And how do I make my highlights stand out? I define the darker areas. I'm really trusting in the process here. I'm just kind of like going through and thinking 1, 2, 3 shadows, grays, highlights. I've been mentioning over and over again. Where's the light? Where's that highlight? And I'm going to define that highlight with the shadows. So I define this shape, the highlight, with the shadows. And I'm trying to really make the shadows more shapes, not just lines. And the shadows undulate. They kind of go in and out, light and dark, push and pull, push and pull. Starting to come together. Contours. I don't know that much about makeup, but like the bronzer, highlight, the way you can shape or create the illusion of shape on human face. That might be a metaphor for this process. The shadow comes to a sharp area right here. It's a rhythm. Look at the echoes, the rhythm, the repetition of light areas and shadow areas. And they really work together to create that illusion. Rhythm, patience. And we make mistakes here and there. We're human. Even within that shadow, there's like a little bit darker shadow. Follow that contour. I don't know if any of you have developed traditional photography film in a dark room. You get to transfer your negative image using chemicals onto paper, project the light through the negative, and that transfers the image, the lights and darks, onto your photographic paper. And it's a beautiful process because it's not exactly instant, but there's like a gradual revelation of the lights and the darks. Really cool. It's a deep recessed area right here. There's shadow coming down, curving around this shape. Wow, look at how that shadow, defining that shadow, flowing into this shape, this ridge here, creates a more rounded quality to this piece. Patience. Slowly define the lights and the darks. Notice the geometry, the triangles, layers of light and dark, the subtlety in places. So here's that little crevice here, it comes out. There's the highlight around it. So I'm not going to keep it just as a line. So how do I make this highlight come out? Well, below it, I'm going to make it darker. The area that's obscured. Follow the path of that shadow as it goes around that form to the edge. So by putting this shadow here, it allows this shape to emerge, gives it more volume, the illusion of 3-dimension, which is not easy. It takes time and practice and, you know, getting feedback, like what's wrong with my drawing? Why is it not doing that? Down here, there's my highlight. Protect your highlights. Let's take a break here. I just need to take a look at the camera, see. Man, that's looking pretty good. The further you look at it. I want to work on this a little bit more, which is there's a transition point. There's like a little bit of a shadow right here, the fall off. Okay. There's a little interesting triangle right here. Block that in. Here is a shadow. Comes down and then goes into like a highlight area. But here's that fall off. There's that area, that kind of little triangle. Let's go back and do this ridge up here. This shape comes across. It kind of breaks up a little bit because of the fabric. Ooh, here's a ridge right there. Look at that. So this is the ridge, comes around this little loop. So I'm going to define the shadow within that. Look at that. So that helps to define the highlights around it. And this area right here, just a little bit darker, a little bit more obscured. And it comes out and reveals itself like a wave. And around it, the highlight, I need to make the other side slightly darker. This fabric's slightly angular. There's like a little bit of a fold or breaking. There's a little triangle right here. But there's my highlight. Protect your highlights. How's it look, guys? Do you see the connection between the original? All right, so I'm going to kind of let you get off onto your drawing, but I have one last, recommendation for you. So those of you who have worked with your cross-hatching, I'm going to put in some cross-hatch lines moving in the direction of the fibers of this t-shirt. And it's going to help me define the folds. So I'm going to put in little lines showing the turn. So it's almost like little directional, but as I build up these little curved hairs, look at that. Look at that, I'm just curving these little marks. This kind of directs your eye to see the flow in the direction. It helps to emphasize the transition of lights and darks. A little bit more dramatic. That flow, that movement throughout this piece. So it's not so static. But don't get too busy where you're just kind of making it up. Try your best to continue to see the lights and darks. Make this area a little bit darker. It'll bring out the highlight right here. And again, this is an exercise of this technique. And you can practice with different surfaces, different fabrics. But the more you do this in different ways, you can put objects underneath your fabric. You can hang the fabric on a wall, let gravity take control, and you can like experiment that way. If it's a little rough there, you can go ahead and take your... You don't want to overdo the tissue. It'll ruin all the good work that you created. There you go. So let's see here, a little bit more kind of that cross-hatching, moving. See how that fold just drops off there? Let's use that technique to kind of bring in those lines off the side, coming down. Like a waterfall. Delicate layers. Let's get this whole area. Let's look in that area. It's like a ski resort. You see that? It's like a mini ski resort. We're in a helicopter looking out in this landscape of folds. I think we made a lot of progress, guys. Was this helpful for you to just, does this make sense to you? The explanation, the process, step by step. You can always rewind the video, go back, see the steps again. You got a little dark area right there. Let's bring that dark area. That gradient. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Nice flow, turning. Highlights, grays, shadows. Highlights, grays, shadows. Transitions from light to dark. Okay, what are we going to do now? Let's go back to that eraser. Let's go back and tidy up a few areas here. Just slightly make it a little bit darker. Then I'm going to go back in with the that little wedge I created with the eraser. I'm going to draw the light again. Follow that highlight. Wow, that is so cool. And I can actually use that technique of little hatch linear work, moving in the direction of the light. Fantastic. Man, look at that. So we trust the process. Make this a little more dramatic. Bring back those highlights. It's a little ridge line right there. Highlight right there. Flows down, connects with this highlight right here. We're giving something for the eye and the brain to see logically. Take your time. There's that highlight coming back, that rhythm. I'm just going to finish out just up here a little bit, just do a little more definition, and we'll just wrap it up. Wrap it up. All right, here we go. So here, I'm going to define that highlight area right here. And how do I make this ridge stand out? I want to make the other side a little bit darker. Transitions from light to dark. Dark, light, dark again. It's strange, the more you stare at this, the more details you notice. Even the shadows have dimension. Look at the variations of light and dark. The highlights depend on the shadows. I think we're done for now. That was fun. All right. Okay, now I gotta just stop. Let's take a break. Sometimes you hold your artwork 3 times the distance away, but I think that is really, I'm satisfied with that right now. I think that's a good stopping point. And if you take a break, come back to it later on, you might see something else to work on.